Shalom Aleichem, welcome to Tried by the Fire with Yoshi. In this finale of the series, I have somewhat to say concerning the scholars, but stick around. I have timestamps below, and I'm going to go into exactly how many Aramaic manuscripts we have today, where they are, and the evidence that proves they are the exact replicas of the original documents penned by the apostles themselves. It's time to stop listening to the scholars and thinking that their conclusions are an honest, educated, thorough assessment based on the actual data and evidence. Being a scholar is a career. It's not an unbiased endeavor for truth, neither is what they say the objective fact. On the contrary, most of their conclusions are absolute nonsense when you actually look at the evidence from a realistic, logical, and reasonable perspective. In the modern day and age, information, data, and evidence is available for everyone for free. We have no need to trust what the scholars say when we can look at the evidence ourselves and think logically and realistically without the bias of money pushing us along. It's time to get with the times. The scholars have abused their position of authority through the illusion of making everyone think that they are the educated ones with all the logical answers based on the evidence. They convince the populations that what they say is as close to fact as you get because of their so-called scholarly consensus, making it sound like this very scholarly consensus was individual scholars reaching the same conclusion independently, when in fact it's a whole school of scholars who only get their work published if it's approved by a review of their peers who operate under certain fundamental axiomatic premises. Thus we have the term peer-reviewed. Since when was peer review a positive thing? Since when do my findings and my conclusions based on the actual evidence only have merit if other scholars agree it matches the already established axiomatic consensus? If it has to conform to the established consensus, what's the point in studying? It's absolute nonsense. There's no room for scholars who challenge the axiomatic consensus of the system. Therefore, the scholarly profession has become a church choir where everyone must sing the same note, which is the opposite of true study and discovery. Scholars' absolute nonsensical conclusions show up all over when you look at their assessments concerning the New Testament and when you look at why they made that assessment. It's not only nonsensical, but straight-up deception, preying on the fact that most people aren't looking at the data, so making wild claims that are clearly false to anyone thinking reasonably. So I'm not just disagreeing with another plausible assessment and conclusion that mainstream scholars arrive at. On the contrary, I'm saying that the conclusions that the scholars arrive at is absolute nonsense and not even plausible and complete deception. I'm simply saying that my conclusions, and that of many others, are simply based on the evidence and actually logical and reasonable. So let's get to the truth about this Aramaic Peshitta New Testament. How many manuscripts actually exist, and how far back do they date? Is there any evidence that they are actually related to the original Aramaic documents penned by the apostles themselves? How reliable are they? How many mistakes are in them? Or how well do they line up one with another? The Greek manuscripts contradict each other constantly, with mistakes, edits, omissions, and contradictions everywhere throughout thousands of tiny manuscript fragments. Is the Aramaic really much different? Oh, let me tell you. The manuscripts of the Aramaic Peshitta New Testament that we have in custody today exist in the Erbil Patriarchate Vault, Erbil, Kurdistan region, Iraq, holding 358 complete manuscript codices, the Monastery of Darul Zafaran, Mardin, southeastern Turkey, holding 8 New Testament manuscripts, the Metropolitan Palace of the Chaldean Syrian Church, Thrissur, Kerala, India, holding 14 New Testament manuscripts, the British Library, London, holding Deir al-Suryan manuscripts, including the core 65 ancient 4th to 7th century witnesses, the Laurentian Library, Florence, Italy, holding the 586 AD Rebula Gospels, the John Rylands Library, Manchester, United Kingdom, holding the 12th century Crawford Codex, the Museum of the Bible, United States, holding the Khaburis Codex, and the St. Catherine's Monastery, Sinai Peninsula, Egypt, the historical discovery site of early Aramaic fragments including 78 full New Testament books including 54 full Gospel copies, 11 of which date to the 4th and 5th centuries, 18 copies of Paul's continuous 14 letters, 3 dating to the 5th and 6th centuries, and 6 copies of the books of Acts paired with James, 1 Peter, and 1 John, one of which dates back to the same 5th and 6th centuries. All this adds up to exactly 526 physical Aramaic New Testament scripture manuscripts and codices from 7 distinct geographic locations around the globe. Discovered from 4 main geographic locations around the world, namely Mesopotamia, Iraq, generating 358 manuscripts, the Tur Abdin and Levant Belt, southeastern Turkey and Syria, generating 10 manuscripts, the Desert of Egypt generating 144 manuscripts, and the Malabar Coast, southern India, generating 14 manuscripts. Completely separate geographic locations from around the world, unable to collude or make sure their late manuscripts align. So who cares about super late manuscripts from the 13th to 17th centuries? When you compare them to the ancient manuscripts, their importance becomes clear. These late manuscripts are not manuscripts that were found next to the ancient manuscripts, where someone could easily just find the ancient manuscript in a modern date and copy them directly from the ancient manuscripts that we have today. They were found in completely different geographic locations and copied from a completely different source of manuscripts. Yet, they align with the ancient manuscripts from the completely different geographic locations 98 to 99% identically. The 1 to 2% variation is entirely word spelling only. In stark contrast, the Greek manuscripts only line up less than 63%. The over 37% failure rate is due to heavy structural corruptions, including complete omissions of entire narrative stories, completely different words, intentional theological modifications, and wild scribal typos. Exactly what you would expect if the Greek was a translation from the Aramaic done by different scribes in different geographic locations. While the Aramaic remains virtually identical even across different geographic locations and times. The only way for that to happen is if literally all manuscript traditions traced back to a much, much earlier original that was absolutely identical. It's like a tree of manuscripts that split at the trunk and developed their own family of manuscripts, yet remain completely identical, showing that they came from the exact same original trunk. So even though we do not have the original trunk in existence today, since the strict scribal copying tradition was to discard of the old manuscripts and replace them with the new ones, these later manuscripts spanning from the 5th century all the way to the 17th century from completely different geographic locations serves as absolute evidence that this original trunk of an original Aramaic Peshitta actually existed. And not only that it existed, but that it is exactly identical to the manuscripts that we have today. There would be no other way for these different communities in different geographic locations to, as it is supposed, translate their Aramaic text from the Greek New Testament independently and have their Aramaic manuscripts line up identically 98 to 99%. It's literally impossible. The variations in different ways you can translate one language to another are too many. For example, we have this Japanese sentence. 最初から神様が宇宙と地球を創造しました。そして地球が形のなく空想でして、暗闇が深海の上にあり、神様の霊がお水の上に羽ばたいてました。In English, keeping the Japanese syntax and grammar, that would read, From beginning, God space with earth created. Doing so, earth formless and empty place was, and darkness deep ocean over was. God's spirit water over fluttering was. Fixing the syntax to make it more understandable but keeping a rigid translation would give us, From beginning God created space and earth was formless and empty place, and darkness was over deep ocean, and God's Spirit was fluttering over water. Another translator could choose to translate it to make it more natural sounding in English rather than strictly keeping to the Japanese phrasing and say, "In the beginning God created the heavens and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was over the deep, and the Spirit of God fluttered over the water." Even all the English versions of the Bible show this exact kind of variation in translation. That's essentially what's different between each version, while the Hebrew Bible remains identical without variation because it's the original. Variation in the text is the natural state of translations. One scribe would choose to translate a Greek phrase in this way, while another scribe would choose to translate a phrase in the other way, as there would be multiple ways to say the same things in Aramaic from the Greek. This would result in Aramaic manuscripts that may agree in meaning, but differ when you compare letter to letter, word to word. The 99% identical nature of the Aramaic manuscripts is the MO of the original language. The existence of these Aramaic manuscripts proves that they were all copied from a much earlier tradition, and that's saying much earlier than even the 4th and 5th centuries, which takes you back all the way to the 1st century, proving that the Aramaic Peshitta New Testament that we have today in perfect, pristine condition is in fact the original natively penned Gospels and letters of the apostles themselves. This evidence completely changes how we approach the New Testament. When we want to check the original meaning of the original word, we're not looking it up in Greek. We're looking it up in Aramaic and looking at it through a Hebraic culture.